So good morning, everyone. Dear distinguished panelists, audience, welcome to the third annual UAE Public Policy Forum. Again, on behalf of the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government, I would like to thank you for your participation with your time and efforts. It gives me great pleasure to moderate such distinguished panel. We are also delighted to have the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Authority as a strategic partner for this event, and their leadership and role in this area are instrumental. We aim to contribute to the policy discussion around SDGs, implementation in general through this event, but in this session in particular, to the SDG 4 on education, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So before moving forward, I would like to introduce the panel. We have Dr. Eric Champagne, Associate Professor in Public Administration and Director of the Center of Governance of Ottawa University. Then we have Professor Sakri Abdul Hamid, former Science Advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia and former Chairman of the Board University of Malaysia. Next, we have Professor Raed bin Shams, Director General of the Institute of Public Administration, BIPA, in Bahrain. And last but not least, we have Professor Laurel McFlanagan, Executive Director of NASPA, which stands for Network of Schools of Public Policy, Affairs and Administration. The title of the session today is Lifelong Learning, Skills Development, and Enhanced Competencies for Sustainable Development. The way we are going to proceed is the following. I will briefly provide a snapshot, some food for thought very fast to provoke a little bit the audience and to provoke a little bit the panelists. And then we'll start with certain questions that are going to be asked across the board. And at the end of the session, we will open for Q&As for the audience to ask questions to all the panel. So, lifelong learning, skills development, and enhanced competencies for sustainable development are of critical importance, particularly nowadays that we are witnessing a lot of paradigm changes in terms of science and technology and the world of work. We are seeing a lot of buzzwords such as gig economy, self-employment, allocracy, democratization and decentralization of knowledge, and so on and so forth. What is very interesting here, according to certain study from McKinsey and Deloitte & Touche, is that while several industries have been disrupted to a certain degree, education is one of the least disrupted industries in the world. At the same time, what is paradoxical is that the fees are escalating exponentially. So the cost of education became so high and is increasingly day by day, while the disruption is so low. This represents a call for action, and this is where we are today. As a consequence of this, what we are seeing is the following. There are two main gaps that should be addressed in education. Particularly is the accessibility gap, meaning not everyone has the same potential and possibilities to access education, and two, the skills gap that is very much translated in this common agreed misfit between academia and practice, between the industry and practice. There's a lot of complaints, and there's a common agreement between practitioners and academic people talking about the following. What we teach is not what is required actually for the government skills for the future and for actual jobs in the private sector. So there we see a misfit that should be addressed immediately. Having said this, I will open the floor to the panel with the first question, and the question is the following. How can nations align their educational policies and their capacity building efforts with the SDGs agenda in general and with the SDG 4 for education in particular? I will invite Eric to get started.
Thank you, Martin. Actually, I wanted to talk also about the role of universities, since I'm from a university, and build on a little bit on Lara Dahan's speech earlier. And I really do think, I concur with her, the universities should be partners in this. They can play, what we mentioned yesterday, that we will need all the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, including universities, and they can play a role in many respects. First of all, they should integrate SDGs, and don't do it really very much, but they should integrate SDGs in their targets, in their own strategic planning, in their own decisions, and their own actions. That should, you know, give the tone also. They should promote, if you think about SDG 3, they can promote good health and well-being for their own employees and own students. SDG 4 that you mentioned, make universities more inclusive, as Victor yesterday has mentioned, accessible to all people, including people with disabilities. And they have to play, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, a big role in the lifelong training of government employees. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. SDG 5 to promote gender equality. SDG 8, they are important economic actors. They play a role in innovation in every communities. SDG 9, they are also important actors. They invest in infrastructure. They can build, when they build their campus, smart building and use their capacity for SDG 11 to encourage sustainable mobility and active transport. They can also, so they can probably play a role just by the action and decision-making in half of the SDGs. But secondly, I think they should include more, and I'm building also on the previous speaker, on the 2030 agenda and SDGs in the regular curriculum. We don't see it enough, you know, in public administration, in public policy, in urban planning. It's not in the practice yet for professors to include the SDGs as a way of raising awareness in the regular programs, not necessarily create new ones, but in the regular programs. And finally, and maybe I'll come back to this a little bit later, but relative to SDG 17, it's important to introduce the new theories of implementation in supporting students, but also governments and government employees that already work and who are implementing many of the SDGs. And I'll come back to this because
Thank you very much, Eric, for that. It's very interesting because here what we are talking about is a common theme that's been discussed on the first session from yesterday's day, that was the session led by Professor Wright, who was talking about very much the importance of including different stakeholders and understanding SDGs with an holistic approach, as opposed to a silo approach. So I would like to continue and have the feedback from Professor Sakri, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very good morning to all of you. May I also congratulate the Rashid School of Government for convening this very interesting forum. First of all, let me address the question that you posed, and that is, how can nations align their educational policies and their capacity building efforts into the SDGs agenda? Let's talk first about the nuts and bolts. Leave the universities later. I think it was a very watershed moment in 2015 when more than 195 heads of governments agreed to the 2030 development agenda and the 17 SDGs. This also coincides with the Paris Agreement on climate change. There and then, ladies and gentlemen, you would witness a very important element that we need to recognize, and that is political will. It has to depend on government leaders. In a country like Malaysia, we have tried to imbibe the SDGs into our 5-year development plans. And we have also addressed the 4th industrial revolution. So on paper, it's very good. But ladies and gentlemen, the proof in the pudding is in the eating, isn't it? Eventually, what needs to happen is to see whether those lofty goals can really be translated into practical problems which would be beneficial for the socio-economic development of our people. And here lies the crucial role of the universities. And one of that, and I must say the SDSN network, anchored by Jeffrey Sachs, was instrumental in providing the substance for governments to come up to the 2030 development agenda. Malaysia was one of the earliest member of the SDSN. I happen to be also a member of the Global Leadership Council. So it's very important for the universities, in particular in the Middle East, to focus on how universities could assist governments to achieve the 2030 development agenda. The approach, as we heard yesterday, has to be holistic. It has to be multi-sectoral. It has to be comprehensive. And it is not difficult, ladies and gentlemen. I think for students or undergraduate, the concept has been introduced very early in their education right to the tertiary level. But let me leave you with the 4 C's of the 4.0 IR. It's not so much the technical stuff, ladies and gentlemen, but the soft sciences. And those are 1, communication, that we have started it today. 2, creativity is very important. 3rd one, critical thinking. And 4th, collaboration. If we can have those 4 C's, we can, as the old adage says, don't give a person a fish, but tell them how to fish, and they will survive the 4th Industrial Revolution and also help nations achieve the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wright. Very interesting comments. So can you give your feedback on this?
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Salatu salam ala Rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. I'm a practitioner. I'm not an academic. So I'm a little bit different. Who is practitioner in the audience? Great, so I'm not alone. So the point over there is we already face lots of problems during our current work, daily work, our situations and problems. As it is already known and mentioned, we all face VUCA, right? The volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situations. Isn't SDGs part of that? SDGs is not coming from Mars to Bahrain or to the world, right? It's already there. We're already facing those daily ins and outs. So what's really new about it? Except that it has been already mentioned in clear terms with goals and indicators. But we already face those daily in and out. So unless we really think to solve our VUCA problems, issues, and things that we already face every day through this view or look of systems thinking and the way things are interrelated, I think we are already going to miss lots of issues. Soft skills is the key for the next generations. However, with the 4th Industrial Revolution, we keep facing the technical things, AI, machine learning, and you know, name them. However, those are not going to solve our current problems, nor going to solve our future problems, nor going to solve or achieve the SDGs. So coming back to Bahrain, as an exemplar that what you are trying to do, we differentiate between 2 things, between training, which is building competencies, and between academics and teaching, which is really focusing on knowledge. However, both have both sides, but there is some kind of more towards the one and from the other. BIPA, which is the Bahrain Institute of Public Management, or Public Administration, we are a training institute. We are a capacity building institute, and training is only one of it. And so we really focus on those skills that can enable each and every person within the government to do their job properly as a practitioner. So we introduced what is called the National Leadership Development Program, the NLDP. The NLDP, we defined leadership a little bit differently. It's not by hierarchy. Though we are covering all levels, but leadership is not just for the upper echelon. Leadership are skills, attitudes, way of thinking for all levels. And we were really facing the challenge on how can we really bring down the SDGs from Mars to the details of each and every person. This is where we have incorporated the SDGs as part of a curriculum in all the different levels of the National Leadership Development Program. For the juniors, they know what's their role in this world. Each one of us have their own purpose. If we don't, then we definitely need to search for it, right? So each one of us has a certain passion towards achieving those SDGs because it's really the whole universe. Through the NLDP, we have what we call the learning experience, individualized learning experience. For the juniors, they would understand where do they fit. For the seniors, they need to come up with projects from their own environments, from their own work that would really fit towards the SDGs, but again, solving their own problems. So it is very much important to individualize that so that people can really take it on board. It's not about a curriculum. It's not about taking it through the universities or the training institutes. It's how can people, as each person, adopt it for himself. If you really don't believe that the SDGs means anything to you, then you're not going to take it on board. And this is why, through the NLDP, with our partners, the UNDP, we've created the curriculum, incorporated it within the National Leadership Development Program, and projects have already come up. We graduate around 2,000 people every year. Sorry.
Thank you, Professor Wright. Very interesting. I mean, two main takeaways are the importance of soft skills development and the importance of experiential learning. So, Laura, what is your take on this?
Well, I focus on education for public service. And I guess I'd be interested in knowing how many of you out there are either current students or past students at MBRSG? Some? A few? Okay.
They're very shy.
They're very shy. So my approach to this topic is very much through that lens of focusing on how education for public service can help achieve SDGs. And so that takes me quite naturally to a focus not just on SDG 4, but on SDG 16, and trying to see education as a means of advancing effective governance. And so, and how a focus on that sort of education can help achieve not just SDG 16, but all of the SDGs, because I believe that effective governance is required. It's that without which you can't achieve the other SDGs. So that has taken me as the executive director of NASPA for many years, thinking about the role that education for public service can play in all this. NASPA is a global organization. We've been around for 50 years. We focus on, we have 350 schools like MBRSG, and all of them are preparing students for public service. And we do many things as an organization, but one of the things we do is accreditation, is reviewing all of these schools for how well they are preparing students for public service. And one of the things that brings me to you all today is every 10 years, NASPA is required to revise our accreditation standards for graduate schools of public policy and public affairs. And we have done something quite significant in our 50-year history, which is we have committed our accreditation process to the SDGs and to adopting the SDGs, and particularly SDG 16, as a framework for evaluating public policy schools. And you know, one of the things, there are two advantages to this. One of them is it enables us to look at schools and their quality regardless of the country's political structure. And we accredit schools. We don't accredit governments or countries, but we focus locally on what the school is doing. But the SDGs, and particularly SDG 16, allows us to look locally at the school, but think globally and ask what that school is doing to advance sustainable development goals. The other thing that the SDG 16 and the SDGs in general allow us to do is to look at the uniqueness of public policy schools. There are lots of graduate education out there. Business schools do a fine job, et cetera. But what makes public policy and public administration schools special is that they impart public service values, and they send people out in the world to advance the public good, not just the bottom line. And SDG 16 gives us 3 very particular public service values for the next generation of students. And they are transparency, accountability, and participation. And I think we can talk a little bit more about that later, but we have found that a really helpful focus for thinking about public service values and quality in public affairs education. That if you focus on things like preparing students to go out and fight corruption, to be engaged civically, to be accountable for what they do, that if we can graduate students out into the world who can contribute to those 3 things, as a society, as a world, we can come much closer to achieving all the sustainable development goals.
Thank you, Professor Laura, for that. Very insightful. It's very refreshing to hear that academic bodies, accreditation bodies are aligned with SDGs and they take it very seriously and it's updated. That's really great to know. I would like now to ask a question generally to the panel, which is the following, and I think it's critical and it's kind of converging with all the topics we've been discussing. And the question is the following: how to make sure that we can reduce the skills gap that exists between academia, practice, and government through the curriculum that we offer to our students or in schools of public administration and public policy. How to make that happen, ensuring that all these skills are going to be aligned and are keeping pace with the evolution of industry needs and market needs. Eric?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we need to act fast. I mean, the change is already there. The pace of change is really fast. And if I may talk about the importance of government's capacity, relevance, competencies in the government, I would say that we need to revise a little bit our curriculum in our universities to tackle the new theories of policy implementation, because I think we are pretty good at doing developing sophisticated policies to address the challenges. But when it comes to implementation, I think we need to revamp a little bit and put more emphasis. I have in my mind my ideal or dream curriculum. I'd say that we need to have, to develop curriculum in proactive policy development to address the changing environment of our governments. We need to put more emphasis on the drivers of implementation in each context. It can vary from one place to the other. We need to develop knowledge on agile and adaptive governance in the public sector, because sometimes one of the critique of government is that they are slow to address change. We need to put more emphasis, I agree with Professor, on collaboration, stakeholders, mobilization, participatory methods. I like also to integrate a little bit more of what we call behavioral economics in the policy, public policy development. And also, I agree with Professor as well on leadership skills and coaching skills for results. And I think we need to do this in, for me, my philosophy is co-production. I don't see myself as a professor just doing lecture. I want to build that knowledge with the government, engage in a collaboration. In my university, in professional development, because we have our master degree, PhD, undergrad programs, that we also have continuous learning, a continuous learning center, and we have two streams of products. One is a catalog. You can take, it's pre-planned, you can take these 2 days on Project Management 101 in February 14 and 15 or something like that. And we have the customized product. So I prefer to work on customized product. Then you engage in a conversation with the government, and then you can ask them, what are your best practices? Let me develop and design a little exercise, a little simulation around what you consider being a best practice. Then I can bring it back to my normal school, and my students will benefit from that. And then you can also interview people. I use the video a lot now. I love to interview civil servants on what they do well, and then you can share it in these contexts. This is what I call co-creation of knowledge. You use these witnesses, these best practices, and I got, I guess, my value added because I know these concepts that I mentioned earlier. I can introduce them, but add to this the practical aspect of it. So I'd love to think about co-production of that new knowledge that is important.
We really appreciate this idea of co-development, co-production of knowledge, which is fantastic because it represents a clear initiative to really contribute to bridging the gap between theory and practice, to put students at the center of experiential learning. Thank you so much. Professor Sakri?
I agree with you that speed is very crucial. There was one recent report which says that in 1984, the shelf life of a business enterprise or work is about 30 years. That's almost a lifetime career. But now it was said that that shelf life is only 5 years. It's only 5 years. So anyone with a job need to tweak and to replace that. And I think this is where lifelong learning is very crucial, where the universities, for example, needs to work with the private sector, as you say, the practitioners, you know, in the private sector and government, on how to address this kind of problem. And again, I still believe that it's not so much the domain knowledge which we can acquire, but things like emotional intelligence, you know. You need to have that. to react. Time management, strategy, and effective communication. These are the soft skills that align with the roles that cannot easily be replaced by automation. So human, as you said, is still at the center of this debate, you know. So that is why it is not just the hard sciences, but the soft skills that we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your input. Again, we see the importance of soft power, again, very, very critical into these times. How to reduce the gap?
Speed is definitely needed.
Yeah.
It is the essence, especially with this moving, if I would say, moving targets.
Right.
But how can the car move speed if it is just in the neutral? The engine is accelerating, but the car is not moving because it's not put into the drive. Lots of work is done, said, in all aspects. Unless we bring that into the reality and actual practice by the individuals, and then the organizations, and then countries, things are not going to happen. Traction is very much important so that the car can really move. And this is why, for example, we have the small, humble experience that we have in Bahrain is being adopted now by the UN as an international best practice because things have already developed and came out as experiences, projects, tangible. People can really feel, can really touch, and at the same time, it's done by the people themselves. So I think the gap needs to be bridged by the collaboration word. We always use crowdsourcing. The power in the collective contribution. But yet we are not really approaching the individuals, those who are all over the place, either in the government or in the private sector or in the public life. Lots of people, let's go to reality a little bit. Would my mother, Allah yahfadha, understand what is SDGs now? No? Are those who are in the majalis, our own places, those are discussing their daily life, do they really care about SDGs? Has it really reached them? Do they really relate to them? If they don't, then we are really missing a huge number of collective power. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wright. And again, the key is collaboration and having a very strong leadership for accelerating SDGs and implementing SDGs. Professor Laurel?
I think that for me, you close a gap through the education system, through experiential learning, that we have found, you know, for many years, professors got up in front of the room, they talked, students took notes, they regurgitated it on a test, and it was over. And I think there's an appropriate focus increasingly on experiential hands-on learning. For me, SDG 16 gives an added urgency to that. And you close the gap not just through experiential learning, but through intense, you know, there's an urgency to it. And the sorts of things that we're trying to do in classrooms right now, like not just talk about data, teach forensic data, teach students how to go out and figure out how to collect data and from new sources and new places to really look at accountability, for example. Another thing that we're seeing is don't just talk about participation and engaging with citizens, and when you go out in the big world, you're going to do that. Practice it while you're still in school. We see a lot of our schools are out doing vaccination campaigns, having students out actively working in the community. It's not just because that's an important goal, that is, but by having the students experience it and do it, they are seeing participation and civic engagement up close. And again, the SDG 16 provides an added urgency to that. I think that's probably enough for now.
I find it fantastic and fascinating because everything at the end of the day is about experiential learning and living and feeling to develop those skills. It's not about memorization anymore. It's not about traditional ways of education as we used to be. Disruption should and must take place as soon as possible, as Eric was saying before. We are very proud that at the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government, for example, we have implemented since last semester in a very successful fashion an approach to teaching and learning that is called project-based learning, in which we involve stakeholders from the government, stakeholders from the private sector, and from academia, putting students at the center. So instead of having final exams where they have to memorize, they have to really address a real issue, solve real life situations for policy makers to have different ideas and different approaches. So this is something that we've been very bold in this move, and we are planning to move it forward, and we have very, very positive feedback from all the stakeholders involved. Having said that, we are going to have this opportunity right now. We have 10 minutes for questions and answers. So if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question or challenge any view or comment on any view, please let us know. We have immediately one question there.
Hello, thank you. My question concerning financing these SGDs, because as economists say, there is no free lunch in America. This is one. The other one is that, do we prioritize the 17 SDGs? Which one is first, second, third? And the third notice is that Mr. Ra'id said his mother did not know or doesn't know about these SDGs. It is not necessary to know. What we really want from the SDGs is the impact on our lives. If we implement these SDGs, is our standard of living raised or it is down? This is how I look at the SDGs. Thank you.
Someone would like to comment on that?
Yeah.
Please, Professor Wright.
When you said about the investment, it immediately came to my mind that when we speak about continuous learning, it's not just about training or education. Research is key into this. And this is why, for example, in Bahrain, in BIPA in particular, we have adopted what's called the Middle East and North Africa Public Administration Research Network. And now it is already linked with the UN Global Coalition think tank networks, which is main purpose is to create research with traction in the Arab world at least to serve the SDGs. And we've discussed the financing in particular, and we are having an investment workshop early this year. Around, the figures, if I recall them correct, 4.5 trillion is needed to achieve the SDGs. However, I think only 3.5, only 1.5 is available with the governments, and the rest is with the private sector. And that's where the collaboration needs to be done. Yet the question is, again, what's in it for them? And going back to the lower levels, dribbling it down, what's in it for you? You as a person, your efforts is worth money, right? Why should you do it yourself if you don't really believe in it? As much as we would like everyone, all of us would like to have this world much better than today, but if we don't know how to go about it, where to do, what's kind of contribution that I can do, then it's not going to work. Investment is needed. Prioritization based on individuals, that's clear. And governments have their own prioritizations. For example, the UAE in Bahrain, we have high committees ministerial committees to ensure that the SDGs are implemented with list of priorities and projects. But are they linked to us as individuals? Are we linked to those as individuals? That's a question that we need to bridge, I believe.
Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. This is very interesting. Abed Baida, CEO of Identity Branding Forum. This session actually brought me back to 2014 workshop we did in collaboration with the Association of Arab University. At that workshop was aiming to measure the readiness of universities in the Arab world for the millennial generation in 2018. The result, surprisingly, was 0. The millennial generation, I'm sorry, this is encouraging because it creates an opportunity. The newer generation basically are faster to acquire information than the instructor in a classroom, are faster to process data than the whole university is, have access to resources than a whole university campus may have. So this brought us to think thoroughly when we developed our Sustainable Human Development Protocol about what is education? Do we really need education? Especially at times where graduates, postgraduates are unable to get jobs. Is education about disruptive thinking or critical thinking? Is it about problem solvings or opportunities creations? How engaged is universities in the life journeys of human development or in the relationship of human business journey, lifelong development? We missed the term. I think what we really need to look at is defining the new terms of what is education role, definition, responsibilities in disruptive times. I agree with when you went to the starting statement when you said we are least disruptive, while everything is becoming more disruptive. Manufacturers are no longer in control of their production. Restaurants are no longer in control of their menus. Education, universities are no longer in control of education. So in the disruptive midst of things, we really need to take a different look on what is education. What is pre-universities? Is it about innovative skills social skills development of students in that level? When we get into the universities, now we have valid opportunities to develop talents of valid local market value. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone would like to address that comment?
Yes, I think this is a very pertinent question. I think this is also where an organization like the Sustainable Development Solution Network has been playing a pivotal role, where they're trying to link universities with the real problems facing the world. So the onus is not only on university leaders, but for university leaders to work with others outside the sphere, the private sector, the NGOs, and the rest, and to collaborate, and to find solutions. So yes, we need to review what education is all about. But I agree with our distinguished guest from Bahrain. Eventually, it's not the SDG. It's about life. It's about sustainable development. It's about how we survive into the future. And that is very stark. That is why we need everyone on board, educators, policymakers, politicians, and only then can we find the light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Professor Sakri. I fully agree. It's a collective endeavor, but we agree on the following extent. I believe that improving our skills base is critical to increasing prosperity, one thing, and prosperity will come only from developing the ability to learn and relearn skills, whatever it is. And you were asking, what is education? And I would like to quote John Dewey, who says, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. And the main message here, to close the panel, is the following. Education is about experience. It's about hands-on. And the only way to really learn is through doing, experiencing, and feeling what we do. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much to our panelists for that interesting discussion, and thank you to the members of the audience who posed those very interesting questions and comments for us. We will now be taking a brief break. We'll be reconvening in here at 10:45 a.m., where we'll be hearing about the role emerging technology plays in the SDGs. See you at 10:45. Thank you.